Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as I mentioned in last week's opening, as something that I would be looking forward to during my work up in Wyoming and Montana, the weather has been awesome so far. Some thunderstorms in the evening and even a couple of nights so far, we've had some hail in Gillette. But for the most part, the weather that I was looking forward to the most was no snow. Now, the early morning hours have been chilly, but nothing like the past. It's in the high 40s or low 50s. It's a perfect temperature for a cool down after my morning workout routine before heading to the field. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in the past, but I try to stay on a schedule that matches my circadian rhythm of back home. So each day I wake up at 10 after 2 in the morning, spend an hour or so in the hotel gym, but this weather has been enticing me to do a bit of jogging outside in the morning. But anyway, an hour or so, some physical fitness, a shower, then I head out to the field. The crews that I work with start their day at 6:30 in the morning with their first, in normal terms, a planning meeting for the day. That means I try to be on location by at least 6:15 every day to engage with the on-site leadership prior to their meeting. Often, that means I must leave my hotel by around 4:20 or 4:30 in the morning because of the distances I have to drive. By 7 a.m., these guys are at their normal day of back-breaking work, trying to get our nation to the point of not only energy independence, but to the point of becoming an energy exporter once again. I know that I've stated this in the past, that these are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. And I like to remind them, in addition to my human performance and safety coaching, that what they do contributes immeasurably to national security. I want to take the opportunity again this week to plug the event that I mentioned last week. In fact, I think I'll continue to do so up until the week prior to the event. So once again, mark your calendars now for the Tennessee Constitutional Grassroots Coalition Freedom Festival. It's going to take place on the 4th of October. The location for this year's festival is the Tate and Lyle Performing Arts Center, which is located at 1470 Roberson Springs Road in Loudon, Tennessee. To check out this year's lineup of entertainment and guest speakers, and they're added to them quite frequently, visit tcgc1776.org. Again, their website is tcgc1776.org. It is organizations like Tennessee Constitutional Grassroots Coalition, Tennessee Stands, Knox for Liberty, Empowered Sevier, Empowered Jefferson, East Tennessee Conservatives, and many others that work to not only influence legislators in our state government, but also to educate and empower the people so they can start taking part in our system of self-governance. If you are not active in a grassroots conservative group where you live, try and find one to become a part of it. If there isn't one, nothing is stopping you from starting your own. That is how we start taking not only our country back, but also to influence our individual states to start reasserting their sovereignty over the national government. For now, though, let's return to the arena for the final part of our three-part interview and take a stand alongside conservative Republican and servant leader, Tennessee State Representative Jody Barrett. So let's get on with the show. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews,
and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil.
No, again, at the end of the day, we're back to kind of full circle to what we started talking about at the very beginning of this, and that is, the 10th Amendment and the way that the founders created this government. Uh, the states got together as a group and said, "Hey, we have our authority, you have your authority next door in Kentucky, and you have your authority in Virginia, but we kind of need to have some sort of overarching government that is in place to protect our national interests, protect our homeland, do a few distinct things, but we're going to put all of these restrictions on what authority and power that federal government's going to have. But it comes from us, the states. We're going to get together. We have to vote to ratify the Constitution. If we didn't ratify the Constitution, the federal government wouldn't exist. But we've forgotten that. And now, just the vast majority of people walking around a sidewalk aimlessly in America think that the federal government created the states and that it was here first. And that's just not the way. That's not the way it happened. People need to spend a little more time, I think, in history and government civics classes.
Right. I mean, your average high school or even native born college graduate could not pass the citizenship test that most people, people that are immigrating here to become citizens have to pass. Our own citizens couldn't pass a citizenship test. Oh, I think you're frozen again.
Oh, there we are. We're back.
Yeah. Like I said,
Sorry about that.
no problem. I said our average native high school and college graduates here, they couldn't pass a citizenship test that people have to pass to become citizens.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I'd love to. I've had some conversations with some of my friends in the legislature who are on the education committees and very very vocally uh, outspoken about public education in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And they have some pretty strong opinions about homeschooling. Some of them not so good. And I would love to get 5 homeschoolers and 5 public school kids and let them sit down and take a citizenship test and see how the results are. I promise you that the public school kids understand our history and our civics much better than the average public school child right now.
I've had several homeschool advocates and people in the movement on the program, and I've said this for a while now. Homeschooling is the only thing that'll save the republic.
Look, that is true educational freedom.
Right.
And look, every parent is a homeschool parent. Whether you send your kid to school or not, you're still teaching them every single day, whether you know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
You're teaching them by your own example. You're teaching them by helping them navigate through whatever issues or things that they're dealing with in life. You were their first teacher. You taught them how to eat, how to dress themselves, how to go to the bathroom and the potty, all of those things. And so we're all homeschool parents. The question is just to what extent that we are able and willing to take responsibility for the educational opportunities that our children have. My wife and I just ended up making a decision 20 years ago when our oldest started getting to be close to school age that we were going to try it and see how it worked. And I worked a few extra hours here and there, and we made some sacrifices along the way for my wife in order to be able to stay at home and do that. And then we woke up 20 years later and one's already graduated college, one will graduate in December, and another one's, getting ready to start high school. And it's like anything else, you make adjustments and you get used to it. And our I guess approach was always, we'll do this until we feel like we're not offering what these kids need. And if we feel like they're not getting what they need to be successful, then we'll go look for other alternatives. And it just, with all the other folks and support organizations and other families here in our community, it just worked out to where we never had to do that, and we're so grateful for that.
Yeah. You talked about, you making sacrifices. I think that's one of the big challenges or obstacles that people that are considering homeschooling. They think that's they're going to have to sacrifice something, but they don't see that if they don't make the individual short-term sacrifices, they're sacrificing the long-term consequences of the failed public school system.
Well, I mean, look, how do I say this without being offensive?
Go ahead, be offensive.
If you don't sacrifice yourself and your personal comfort for your children and what's best for them, then you're sacrificing your children. That's just me personally. That's my personal opinion. Um, I would take a bullet for my kids. I would give up my career today to do, if that was necessary for my children to be safe and happy and healthy and successful in life. It's not about me, it's about them. And that's the thing about being a parent. The first, when your first child's born, your perspective on the world changes. At least it should. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong. We grow up as children and everything's about us. It's about, being my hunger and my comfort and what I want and me. And then as we get older, maybe we find a mate and we get married, and there's still, it becomes a little bit more about them, but there's still a lot of our,
Selfish component to it.
yeah, there's still your own personal desires that you want and what you're chasing, whether it's career or otherwise. But the moment you and your spouse have a child together, as you're intended in the Bible to do, um, your perspective on the world changes. It is no longer about you and what you need and what threats and dangers are out there for you. It's about that child it's like the scales are removed from your eyes and you suddenly see all of the things that are going wrong in the world or that could possibly go wrong that will affect the next 18 to 20 years of this child's life. You talked earlier about, deciding to run for office and having issues with your bona fide status and all that. I have issues with that, with our party, in that most people don't plan to run for office years in advance. Many of us just wake up. We have a political or a personal awakening,
Mhm.
whether that's a professional thing or a run-in that we had with our government that gets us fired up, or we have a child and it makes us see the world in a different way. And we realize, we look around and we go, man, things aren't going well and somebody needs to do something about it. Most of the time when we say that, we think somebody else needs to do something about it.
Right.
But more often than not, that's God whispering in your ear, no, you knucklehead. I mean, you need to do something about it.
If
Uh,
not me, then who? If not now, then when?
exactly. And so, you know, that's, I know I'm kind of rambling all over the place on this, but that's what happens when you have children. It completely changes your perspective and opens your eyes. And sometimes it pushes you to run for office and do something crazy.
Right.
Uh, but that is a sacrifice, right? I'm let's not make it about me. Let's make it about, any number of members that are friends of mine, school teachers, or, they own their own business and they're sacrificing time away from their family, from their business, their livelihood, from their hometown. Many of them driving 4, 5, 6 hours away to go live in Nashville for 4 months out of the year, for peanuts, for $28,000 a year. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it as a sacrifice in order to serve the greater good, to help Tennessee be better. Um, at least that's what they should be doing. Um, and so, the same thing for us as parents and for our kids. If we're not willing to sacrifice everything to give our kids a better life and a better opportunity, whether that's homeschooling, whether that's getting a second job or working extra hours to make a little bit of extra money to put them in a school that they want to go to, or selling our house and moving to a different district or whatever the case may be. Most parents that are truly doing it for the right reasons and driven to provide for their kids will do anything for them. Unfortunately, society has changed a lot or since I was a kid. That's the way I was raised. But a lot of people aren't raised that way now, and they have different experiences, and we have a lot of selfishness going on.
And they've bought into a lot of the lies that the government helps to spread about that. Hey, you don't have a choice unless you do X, Y, and Z.
Well, it's the old, hey, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. You just go do your thing and you give me your child and we'll take care of this so that you don't have to worry about it. And that's an awful way to live. It's a great way to lose a country.
Right.
Is by allowing your government to take over and do your job for you. Your job as a parent is to raise that child and teach that child, and it's biblical. Raise them up in the way that they should go.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not the government's job to do that. It's your job.
Right.
And it's fine for you to say, well, I don't have a choice, and I don't make enough money, and public school is the only option I have. But that doesn't mean that you can't be involved and that you can't, participate and be an active, engaged parent.
Find out what they are being taught.
We can all do that, regardless. It doesn't take money to be engaged. It just takes effort.
But, and one of my favorite sayings that, the epiphany I had after I retired and woke up to the government machinations. There is nothing on this planet so well designed to take away and waste our money and take away and erode our freedoms than the government we apathetically let get elected. So this participation, especially with I see a lot of conservatives that don't participate in the primaries because they're not closed. So they know that their votes are being diluted by the moderates and even by the Democrats. When I ran here, I had people boasting on my Facebook page, hey, we're going to vote for the other guy because we don't want you going to Nashville.
Sure.
And they were Democrats.
Well, that's why they don't want caucuses, right?
Right.
Because if there was a caucus, then the more conservative candidate is almost always going to win.
Right.
But if there's a primary, then it becomes much easier to get this outside PAC money to come in, attack that more conservative candidate from multiple different angles, and then isolate them. And then you get these middle ground voters to come in and say, well, this guy looks a little bit more legitimate, or he looks a little less crazy than this person over here. It's basic stuff that they've been doing for many, many years.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into another topic that's one of my favorites, the Second Amendment. Why can't we get true constitutional carry through a supermajority Republican General Assembly?
Because the subcommittee that it has to come through will not allow those bills to come out.
Not a lot of people even understand this. I talked to Mr. C. Richard Archie a lot, and I've had John Harris on the program a few times. We are the patron state of shooting things in Tennessee.
Yep.
but it's against the law to carry a firearm or a club with the intent to go armed in the state of Tennessee.
Makes absolutely zero sense. What is the point of carrying a firearm if you're not intending to go armed?
Exactly. I mean, just removing that line from the code would
Mhm.
give us constitutional carry.
You
It's
know, and that's from the Constitution of 1870, which was written during Reconstruction. And if you do any just a basic, you know, skin deep Google research of the history of the Constitution of 1870, you don't have to look very far to find out the rationale behind it and why it was even necessary, and what some of those provisions are in there for, particularly as it relates to the newly freed slaves that they didn't want to be able to have guns, and didn't want them to be walking around and being armed. It was Jim Crow, the original Jim Crow red flag law was rewriting that portion of the Constitution. And if you do a little bit more research, you'll find that Constitution of 1870 was written and adopted with the intention of it to be a temporary fix. It was supposed to be rewritten again within 5 years. It was only there to be put in place in order to kind of keep the peace until they could get past the pain that was still lingering from the Civil War and Reconstruction. And here we are in 2025, still dealing with that temporary document that has never been corrected or fixed. And we have obstructionists in the way that continue to block all the efforts to get us back to what our original intent was as it relates to the Second Amendment.
absolutely. Now, speaking of those obstructionists, what I find interesting is that the governor will send some of his appointees to
Tax,
lobby the General Assembly,
taxpayer paid lobbyists.
lobbying against the freedoms of the people of Tennessee. Why are we allowing that?
Yeah, so the executive branch is using taxpayer dollars to pay salaries to people to go into the legislative branch to frustrate the job of the representatives of the legislative branch to pass bills, um, to literally and openly fight against and frustrate our ability to get the laws passed that the people elected us to pass. It is a violation of the role of the executive branch, and we allow it to happen. It shouldn't happen, but our leadership, for some reason or another, is okay with it and plays along with it and allows it to go. And they honestly, we several of us, not just the more right leaning members of the legislature, even some of the more moderate members, but folks that are very in tune with and focused on things like the Second Amendment, get very, very frustrated, particularly with the Department of Safety. I don't mind, saying that name.
Mhm.
But you've got TDEC and wildlife resources. They all have their little fiefdoms that they're trying to protect, but they have their marching orders that come directly from the governor. Um, but they come in and they frustrate what we're trying to do, and they do it indirectly. What happens more often than not is you'll get a phone call or an email that says, "Hey, we don't like this bill, or we flagged this bill, or we've got questions." And they may present as if they're going to work with you and try to, massage the language, maybe get an amendment in place. Most of the time, I'm pretty open to that. I'll tell them, well, come on down, meet with me, tell me what it is that you don't like, and let's see if there's a way for us to fix it. If you got a way to make it better, then let's do that. And what I have seen happen a lot is they'll pretend or present as if they're willing to do that the whole time they're working in the Senate trying to kill it behind your back. Or they're going to the committee chair or caucus leadership or the speaker and getting them to kind of play games behind the scenes. But it's at the end of the day, it's taxpayer funded lobbyists that are being paid with tax dollars to fight against your elected representative who is trying to do the work that you elected us to do. And it absolutely does not make any sense.
Absolutely. Oh, so to close it out, what message would you like to send to the grassroots conservatives in the state? This podcast is mainly heard throughout the state. I got listeners everywhere. It's amazing. I got listeners in Sweden for some reason. Anyway.
Awesome. Love it.
I do love me some Norway. I think my most interesting port visit was to Tromsø, Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, where the sun didn't set. And so, one day a bunch of me and other sailors were out. We had a few adult beverages, and we went to the barracks room to sleep it off. And then we wake up and the sun's up. We thought we were late. It's 10 o'clock at night. We thought we were late to work.
The sun never comes up.
Right. So, but what are your messages to the grassroots Tennesseans that are skeptical of the GOP leadership priorities? How can they support representatives like you? You mentioned a couple of Monty Freds, love Monty, who challenge the establishment while advancing a conservative agenda.
Yeah, look, I think we just need to continue to push our own narrative. I think what we're seeing in Tennessee, as it relates to the grassroots, this thing in Williamson County is very ugly and open fight that they have going on there. It's not too dissimilar or too dissimilar from the Tea Party movement and the way the establishment in DC just crushed the Tea Party. Everybody at that time was fired up. We're gonna fight back. We're gonna take back our country. We're gonna get these taxes off our back. We're gonna reduce the size of government, and this is great. We're all for it. And the establishment just started twisting the screws and using procedural techniques, using the rules of the government of Congress, very similar to the way we do it here in Tennessee. We use our house rules and as a weapon sometimes. And what we've got to do differently this time is we can't. I think what I've learned is that we can't infiltrate the current power structure and then try to change it. It's just it's too entrenched. They don't want to change. Obviously, most entities don't. Particularly those that are in power like being in power, and they just want to continue doing what they're doing because the status quo is good for them. And they certainly don't like people like me who might ask too many questions or have too many comments out in the general public. So from the grassroots standpoint, how do we combat that? Really, the only way to do it is to continue holding your representatives' feet to the fire, continue asking the really difficult pointed questions, pay attention, educate yourself. Don't obviously in today's day and age, nobody's really covering the legislature anyway, from a major news networks standpoint. It's not like there's channel, NBC or ABC News down there covering anything that's going on in the state legislature. The only people that are really watching what we're doing, it seems like these days, are the blogs. It's guys like you. It's Tennessee Stands. It's even Tennessee Holler, who I disagree with vehemently on just about everything, but at least he's engaged and doing what he can to try to shine a light on what's going on up there. That's really it. We just have to continue shouting from the rooftops. I feel sometimes, like I'm in the wilderness shouting at the trees, and I'm not sure that anybody's listening. But what I find is more people are paying attention than I really think, and that always seems to kind of manifest itself when things are. I feel like things are just spinning out of control and going going off the rails, little messages start coming in, whether it's text messages or social media DMs or things like that, to just as a reminder, like, hey man, we got your back. We see what you're doing. We appreciate it. Keep fighting. Those are the things that a lot of us need to hear. Um, we hear all the junk and the attacks and the complaints and, well, why aren't you doing this and why aren't you doing that? Um, the positive reinforcement is good too. Um, we all need that from time to time, just an attaboy of, hey, keep doing what you're doing. We got your back and we'll help you any way we can. That's the best thing I can tell you. And for me personally, when people ask, well, what can you do to help? Just pray. Just, prayer is the greatest power that all of us have, that's free. The you don't have to be rich or powerful. You don't have to have status. You can do it on your own time, in your own place, in your own way, but it has real impact on the world. And so if you want to help me or Monty or Todd Warner or Michelle Renault or any of the number of great conservatives and folks that are trying to lead and make a difference, just keep praying for us. Pray for wisdom, pray for strength, pray for uh, peace and patience and perseverance, uh, grace, all those things.
Well, and you always have the backing of this old retired command master chief. And this is a platform that if you want to get the message out anytime, just reach out. We'll be glad to have you on the program. And we thank you once again for joining us. And I'm sure the audience is thrilled to actually hear from a good conservative leader in the Tennessee General Assembly. And we appreciate you coming on today, sir.
Well, I hope they've enjoyed watching the sun go down over my shoulder here. And thank you for your service. I appreciate everything you've done for our country and all the veterans out there that have made the sacrifice from their family and for their personal time and treasure to defend this country, defend our Constitution. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir. Well, folks, that will wrap up this entire conversation with Tennessee State Representative Jody Barrett, a true conservative and a servant leader who is working hard in the Tennessee General Assembly at standing in the gap between an ever-increasing overreach by our state government. When we return next week, it will be just your humble host. I don't have any pre-recorded interviews in the hopper at the moment, although I'm working on a few of them. Some of the guests will be new to the program, and some will be some returning conservative superstars in the state of Tennessee. That should be a bit different, as I haven't done a solo show since the 31st of March. I know one audience member that will be immensely pleased, though, and that would be my mother. She frequently tells me that she prefers my show when it's just me on. Imagine that. She likes to see my face fill the screen and only hear my voice. So, Mom, be sure and tune in next week where it will only be me. Now, once again, I would like to ask the audience that if you're watching this episode on YouTube or Rumble, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you listen to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or any other audio-only platform, please give the show a review. Regardless of the platform you listen or watch the show on, don't forget to subscribe to it or follow it so that you will receive a notification whenever new content is published. Additionally, if you follow the show's Facebook page, you can also like and share the episode on your feeds there. My blog, where I occasionally share news and information of a political nature, in addition to a daily devotional, can also be subscribed to. The website is in the banner below. There are some interesting news now, though, concerning Brandon Lewis and the Tennessee Conservative News. One of the establishment cronies, the trans-publican lackeys, have filed a lawsuit against them to silence the only true conservative news site in the state of Tennessee. As I have said many times before, there is very little difference between trans-publicans and commies. Just like they are using lawfare against President Trump for a decade now, they resort to the same tactics at the state level against conservatives. So if you can, Please support Brandon in his fight in this lawsuit. We cannot lose Tennessee conservative news. Again, because it is the only conservative news in the state of Tennessee. In closing, this week's wisdom from God's word comes to us from the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God, our Savior, who wants all people to be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth. As Representative Barrett mentioned, and the reason for my selecting this week's verse, please pray for him and the other members of the General Assembly here in Tennessee, and for the conservative members in state governments where you reside, that if you don't live in Tennessee, please pray for them and encourage them and support them. These servant leaders are really the only people standing in the gap between the tyrannical tendencies of government and the people they are supposed to serve. You should also pray for those conservative and servant leaders that are serving in the U.S. Congress. Although, as I have stated in the past many times, the national government is beyond repair at this point. But it doesn't hurt. In fact, it helps to pray for those serving there that are at least slowing down the march towards tyranny by the national government. Now, I want to briefly mention last week's preemptive strike by Israel on the demon savages that are ruling the nation of Iran. Please pray for this situation, that it doesn't escalate to the point where our republic gets any more involved than it has been up until this point. We, as a nation, do not need to lose any more blood and treasure in the Middle East. Now, I believe wholeheartedly in Israel's right of self-defense, which includes preemptive strikes against a regime that is a hair's breadth away from a nuclear weapon and has repeatedly called for the annihilation of Israel. And we could support them without sending our troops to die in another war over there. Unless and until the situation changes dramatically, please pray for Israel to triumph and for our nation to remain at peace. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.